Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today we are going to recite Surah Al-Qari'ah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
القارعة.
القارعة.
ما القارعة.
ما القارعة.
وما أدراك ما القارعة.
وما أدراك ما القارعة.
يوم يكون الناس كالفراش المبثوث.
يوم يكون الناس كالفراش المبثوث.
وتكون الجبال كالعهن المنفوش.
وتكون الجبال كالعهن المنفوش.
فأما من ثقلت موازينه.
فأما من ثقلت موازينه.
فهو في عيشة راضية.
فهو في عيشة راضية.
وأما من خفت موازينه.
وأما من خفت موازينه.
فأمه هاوية.
فأمه هاوية.
وما أدراك ما هي.
وما أدراك ما هي.
نار حامية.
نار حامية.
صدق الله العظيم.
صدق الله العظيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Okay, Jazakallah.
Jabir and Jair coming out.
All right, Jazakallah.
Yeah, coming out of the room.
Inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Let's get to the discussion of Surah Al-Qari'ah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Previously, we were speaking about Surah Al-Adiyat and Surah Al-Zilzal. Surah Al-Zilzal is about Akhirah. Surah Al-Adiyat is about this dunya. And then the same pattern carries on. Surah Al-Qari'ah is about basically Akhirah, and then Surah Al-Takathur is about this dunya. So let's get to this surah, Surah Al-Qari'ah. This is a Makki surah, and basically within the surah, the ending is almost the ending of the Mus'haf. It's almost the ending of the Quran, in the sense that in the book form, in the Mus'haf. So therefore, the detailed description and the depth, the meaning of explanation of Jahannam is mentioned in the surah. And this is basically the second last time Jahannam is mentioned in the Mus'haf. Last time is in Surah Al-Humaza. وَيْلٌ لِكُلِّ هُمَزَةٍ لُمَزَةٍ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions Narullah al-Muqada over there. Nevertheless, we have the Surah, Surah Al-Qari'ah. So Surah Al-Qari'ah, Al-Qari'ah basically, we look at the meaning of each word. So basically Al-Qari'ah, Al-Qari'ah means basically the sound, the rattling sound, a sound that occurs multiple times. If a person knocks, it is considered a Qari'ah. The Arabs would say Qara' al-Bab, that means that somebody knocked on the door. So similarly over here, it is a sound that repeats. And if you look at in the middle of the night, if somebody is sitting or sleeping right beside the door and the knock occurs, he hears the sound repeating. So that is that somebody is knocking at the door. That's a scary sound. So that is why if you look at the translation on the side, he mentions the striking calamity. Because whoever it is, if it is a thief or if it is somebody that breaks in, now this is going to be a very scary scene. Therefore, it's a very striking calamity that can occur by the person knocking in the middle of the night. So nevertheless, over here, Al-Qariya is basically referred to the knock in the middle of the night that keeps on happening. And you're basically right beside that door while it's happening. And then he says, "Wama adrak mal qariya." What is this striking calamity? What is this sound that keeps on continuously occurring? And then he says, "Wama adrak mal qariya." How can I explain to you, or how will you be able to understand what this qariya is? So we insan, we're not able to understand exactly the sound, the specific sound that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is referring to. That is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala multiple times he uses the same term. وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الْحَاقَّةُ الْحَاقَّةُ مَا الْحَاقَّةُ وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الْحَاقَّةُ. Even in Surah Al-Qadr, إِنَّا أَنزَلْنَاهُ فِي لَيْلَةِ الْقَدْرِ وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا لَيْلَةُ الْقَدْرِ. So he speaks about the Quran being revealed in Laylatul Qadr, the night of power. What is this night of power? So we are not able to understand the importance of the night of power. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the same term here. That's the sound that keeps on occurring. وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الْقَارِعَةُ. What is that striking sound? How do we explain to you, O insan? How do we explain to you? Because if we were to hear a sound, then we would say it sounds like this and try to describe the person's recitation, etc. But we are not able to describe it in the full manner. Words cannot explain the method or the way how a person is reciting. So similarly, words cannot explain how if you have a fruit, how sweet that fruit is. So similarly over here, words cannot explain that shocking sound or that rattling sound that will occur. And then he says, يَوْمَ يَكُونُ النَّاسُ كَالْفَرَاشِ الْمَبْثُوثِ. Mankind will be on that day, meaning the day of judgment, on that day, كَالْفَرَاشِ الْمَبْثُوثِ. They will be like moths. Moth, you have butterflies, you have moths. So over here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala specifically speaks about moths, and they speak about mabathuth, scattered moths. So if you have a container, a box, and you have moths in there, and the room is dark, and you have one light on, and then you open that lid, what happens? All the moths go towards the light, one light. But if you have a container full of moths, and you're outside, you're basically outside the perhaps outside your house, and the sunlight is all over the place, and you open that basket of moths or that container of moths, what's going to happen? They're not going to go to one place like how in the room they went to one place because of the light. They will be going all over the place. They will be scattered out. So that's what the same term Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses over here. He says, يَوْمَ يَكُونُ النَّاسِ كَالْفَرَاشِ الْمَبْثُوثِ. The mankind will be like scattered moths. Like somebody's going here, someone's going there, and you're not able to grasp and bring them into one area. And then he says, وَتَكُونُ الْجِبَالُ كَالْإِهْنِ الْمَنْفُوشِ. This is very important. Okay, so he says, وَتَكُونُ الْجِبَالُ كَالْإِهْنِ الْمَنْفُوشِ. Okay, وَتَكُونُ الْجِبَالُ كَالْإِهْنِ الْمَنْفُوشِ. So he says, the mountains, Jibal is mountains. So mountains will become like كَالْإِهْنِ الْمَنْفُوشِ. They will become like cotton balls. They will become like puffed cotton balls. And we know as a fact how heavy mountains are, if we were to just see a huge mountain in front of us, it is basically it's so big that we at times we're not able to grasp the whole scene. That's how big it is, and obviously, if you were to just take a portion of it and try to weigh it, it's pretty big. Nevertheless, وَتَكُونُ الْجِبَالُ كَالْعِهْنِ الْمَنْفُوشِ. What's going to happen on that day? That day when that sound will occur, then people will be scattered, running around. يوم يفر المرء من أخيه وأمه وأبيه وصاحبته وبنيه لكل امرئ منهم يومئذ شأن يغني. Mankind will be running away from their own relatives. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم إن زلزلة الساعة شيء عظيم يوم ترونها تذهل كل مرضعة أما أرضعت وتذو كل ذات حمل حملها وترى الناس سكارى وما هم بالسكارى ولكن عذاب الله شديد. People will be going scattering out to so many different areas, to the extent that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned that people, it will look like as if they are drunk. But the reality is, وَمَا هُمْ بِالسُّكَارَى, they're not drunk. وَلَكِنَّ عَذَابَ اللَّهِ شَدِيدٌ. But it is the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that is very severe upon them. So that is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions over here. يَوْمَ يَكُونُ النَّاسُ كَالْفَرَاشِ الْمَبْثُوثِ. Mankind will be scattered out all over the place. And then وَتَكُونُ الْجِبَالُ كَالْعِهْنِ الْمَنْفُوشِ, that the mountains will become like cotton balls. Mountains, so heavy they are, and perhaps the last thing that we will think, in front of us, especially in the Arabs in the time of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, they would be passing by mountains, left and right, because as they would live in the deserts, there would be mountains all over them, near them. Like we know of Safa and Marwa from the few mountains. If you go to Makkah al-Mukarramah, you will see so many mountains. And in fact, the crazy thing is that the Arabs actually had names for these specific mountains. So many different mountains, they had different names for them. Nevertheless, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, the mountains, the thing that you think that perhaps will be the last thing, the breaking, that will become like cotton balls. And then he says, فَأَمَّا مَنْ ثَقُلَتْ مَوَازِينُهُ, that for that person whose ثَقُلَتْ مَوَازِينُهُ, for whose scales, mawazin is basically the scales. So his scales becomes heavy, ثَقُلَتْ, it becomes very heavy. Then what will happen to that person? فَهُوَ فِي عِيشَةٍ رَاضِيَةٍ. That person will be عِيشَة, he will be enjoying. عِيشَة, we have the Urdu term also, aish karna, that means to enjoy, to live the life. So he will be living the life, and radiya, he will be very happy and he will be very satisfied. And as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that is basically the highest contentment that a person can get, is that he gets the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Radiyallahu anhum wa radu an, that they are pleased with Allah, Allah is pleased with them. So that is that contentment that a person will get on the Day of Judgment. فَهُوَ فِي عِيشَةٍ رَاضِيَةٍ, if his scales will be heavy. And then thereafter Allah Ta'ala mentioned, وَأَمَّا مَنْ خَفَّتْ مَوَازِينُ, those people whose scales, mawazin, their scales will be khaffat, khafif, very light. Then what will happen to that person? فَأُمُّهُ هَاوِيَةٌ, for that person, he will end up in Hawiyah. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he mentions Hawiyah, now he explains what is Hawiyah, because Hawiyah, whenever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions something, he wants us to picture it and he wants us to understand it, then he will explain it even more detail. So he says, وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا هِيَ, that what is this Hawiyah? What is this Hawiyah? Hawiyah is basically, if you want to know, basically a canyon. It's not even mountains, it's canyons. Canyons are basically sudden drops, right? Like it looks like a mountain, huge, but then what happens when it goes down? It's a sudden drop. So many canyons put together, and then it's so many mountains put together, but they have sudden drops, not this gradual drop, sudden drop, and that in the middle is basically considered like the whole canyon. Nevertheless, so فهو في وما من خفت موازينه فأمه هاوية. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions فأمه هاوية. So his result, or his where is it? Yeah. فأمه هاوية. So he says that his result, أمه هاوية, basically means his result will be هاوية. His result, his abode will be هاوية. Where he's going to be heading towards, that will be Hawiyah. That will be the canyon. So like a person, when he is at the tip of the canyon, what's going to happen to him? He's going to fall off, and there's nothing that can help him. So similarly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that over here that he has no other protection, and he will end up in Hawiyah because of his actions being very light. خَفَّتْ مَوَازِينُهُ. The actual wording of the sentence, فَأُمُّهُ هَاوِيَةٌ, means mother. So ummuhu hawiya, that means basically his mother is the canyon. So now for you to understand this, basically you have to understand that picture a mother with a child. So the child, what does a child do? Child runs towards the mother. Whenever he needs refuge, when he needs protection, then he runs to the mother. So as the child runs to the mother, what happens in this case, that this person that's falling into the canyon, like the child is running to the mother, similarly, the person will be falling right into the canyon. So you have the gravity that pulls the person, and then you have also the person himself that is basically in this case the child is running towards the mother, right? So similarly, this person not only is he falling and gravity is pulling him in, rather, he himself is also pushing himself down. And why would his body go against him? And why would his body actually want him to fall into the fire of Jahannam? The reality is, on that day, on the day of judgment, um, when people will be asked, and a person, his in the Quran it comes that his body parts will speak against him. His body parts will witness against him on that day of judgment. So uh, he wouldn't want them to witness against him. In fact, he will say that, what is wrong with you? That you are speaking against me. He will tell to his hand, his legs, his mouth, his tongue, his eyes. He will ask it that why are you lima shahidtum alayna? That why are you witnessing against me? They will say, قالوا أنتقنا الله الذي أنتق كل شيء. That that today the one that has given you, or the one that has given everything else to speak, has given us to the ability to speak as well. So our own hands will be speaking on that day. Our eyes will be speaking that day. So this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to with regards to that day. So he says, فَأُمُّهُ هَاوِيَةٌ, that a person will basically, as I was mentioning, that he will push himself down. That's one thing. And the ground is also pulling him in. This is the condition that he will be in. فَأُمُّهُ هَاوِيَةٌ. And another very important, the hawiya is basically a term that was actually used by the Arabs, referring to a bird that would actually go drop itself down right into the canyon as it was perhaps hunting a prey. So similarly over here, when a person is falling into the canyon, the bird is pushing itself down. Similarly, this man himself, he will also be pushing himself down into this canyon. And then he says, وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا هِيَ. Now, what is this hawiya that we're speaking about? He says, نَارٌ حَامِيَةٌ. That this is basically flames, and which are hima, that are, this is the fire that is on flames. وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا هِيَ نَارٌ حَامِيَةٌ. This is a fire that is basically on flames. It's very intensive. It's a very intensive fire that is lit. With regards to that, there's a hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu Abu Hurairah he narrates. He says that naru bani Adam allati tukhiduna juz'an min sab'ina juz'an min nari jahannam. That the fire of this world that we perhaps use, or we light for cooking purposes, etc. So that fire that we use in this world, that is one thing. And then he mentions with regards to the fire that we have lit in Jahannam, that is basically sab'ina. Uh, uh, that fire of this world is only 1/70th, basically 1/70th portion of the fire of Jahannam. So this is very small. What's it called? If you're comparing in the intensiveness of heat, etc., and the intensiveness of destruction, so this fire is very small comparing to the fire of Jahannam. It's only 1/70th. So the Sahaba, they actually asked Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, قالوا يا رسول الله إن كنت إن كانت كافية لكافية, isn't that 1/70th intensiveness of the fire and destruction, etc., isn't that sufficient for us on the day of judgment? Why is it 70 times more? So then he said, إنها إنها فضلت عليها بتسعة وتسعين جزءا. That it has actually increased the 69 folds because of basically because of the punish or the sins that we have done. So this is one hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Another hadith mentions أتدرون ما مثل ناركم هذه من نار جهنم لهي أشد سوادا من دخان ناركم هذه ب70 ضعفا. So Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he mentions that do you know about ما مثل ناركم هذه من نار جهنم, that they explain the similarity between the fire that you have of this world as well as the fire of Jahannam. There is a similarity. However, he says the darkness of it, of the smoke of it, is much more darker. The smoke is much more black and much more darker, and the fire itself is 70 times more worse. In another hadith, Prophet Muhammad he mentioned, "أوقد على النار ألف سنة," that this fire of Jahannam, was lit for 1,000 years. It was lit for 1,000 years. حتى احمرت, until it became red. So the fire was on flames for 1,000 years, then it became red. ثم أوقد عليها ألف سنة. Then for another 1,000 years it was lit. حتى ابيضت, until it became أبيضت, until it became white. Then the fire after red, it became white. Then he mentions that ثم أوقد عليها ألف سنة. Then it was lit for another 1,000 years, meaning a total of 3,000 years it was lit for. He said, حتى اسودت فهي سواد مظلمة. Then it became pitch black. It became so dark that it became like a black, dark flame. It was filled with a black, dark flame. This is the description that Prophet Muhammad he gives of this fire. And then he mentions about the fire. He says, إذا اشتد الحر, that when it becomes very hot, when the days become hot, as summer is coming closer to us, when the days become hot, then he says, make it cold. فأبردوا عن الصلاة. Pray the salah, pray the prayer, and make it cold, meaning cool yourself down with this prayer. And then he says, فإن شدة الحر من فيه جهنم. That this intensive heat that you experience in on the summer days, etc., this is basically considered the min fayhi jahannam. This is basically the breath of Jahannam that we experience. So this is a very little amount of heat that we experience in this world, whereas the reality is on the day of judgment, it is much more intense. So this surah itself starts off with al-qari'ah, with a rattling sound, and it ends off with narun hamia, the flickering flames, right? So this is a very intense surah speaking about Jahannam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is starting off the discussion with a rattling sound, with al-qari'ah, with a sound that continuously occurs, and then thereafter he doesn't answer with regards to that sound, as if he is reading our mind. وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الْقَارِعَةُ. What is this qari'ah? He doesn't tell us what this qari'ah is in the surah, but rather he explains to us something else. He explains to us the result of that qari'ah, the result of that sound. What is going to happen? The result of the sound is such that people will be scattered out, kalfarash al-mabthuth, and mountains will become like cotton balls. And then he says, those individuals, those people, فَمَمَنْ ثَقُلَتْ مَوَازِينُ, their mawazin, their scales were heavy, فَهُوَ فِي عِيشَةٍ رَاضِيَةٍ, that person will be enjoying. وَمَمَنْ خَفَّتْ مَوَازِينُ, those whose actions are light, فَأُمُّهُ هَاوِيَةٍ, that person will enter into Jahannam, that person will enter into Hawiyah. Now there's one very important contrast over here. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is showing over here. First of all, he speaks about mountains, huge mountains. He says, وَتَكُونُ الْجِبَالُ كَالْإِحْنِ مَنْفُوشٍ, mountains, something that you consider very heavy, that becomes like cotton balls. And then on the other hand, you have good actions, like if a person was to give $1 in sadaqah, or perhaps pray salah, recite Quran. So that is like something very small, insignificant, in the sense that if you were to see somebody praying salah, a person is praying salah, and then you have a mountain right beside him, what's more greater? What's more bigger? We will say in the size and in the grandeur of it, you'll see the mountain looks bigger than the person praying salah. But that has so much weight, the mountain, that will become like cotton balls, whereas the person who's praying, his action, which is almost insignificant, that will become heavier than mountains on the day of judgment. That is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, that the person whose actions will be heavier, that person, he will enjoy Jannah. And the person whose actions are not heavier, that person, Hawiya, he will end up in Hawiya. What is that Hawiya that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking about? That it is that canyon that is filled with narun hamia, it is filled with fire and flames. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from that. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide us. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to strengthen us within this month, inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the ability to save ourselves from this horrible fire. Subhanallah.